The story of the Pirate Bay leaves a very clear message about how the internet operates in the modern era. When a system is designed to be decentralized, without relying on a single point or a specific group of people, it becomes nearly impossible to fully control. Governments may shut down servers, arrest individuals, or pass new laws, but they cannot easily eliminate a network that has already spread globally. The Pirate Bay is not just a file-sharing website. It is a symbol of a much larger conflict between the free flow of information and the control of content. It suits how technology can move faster than the law, and when that happens, traditional approaches become less effective. However, the story also raises an important question. Where is the line between freedom and responsibility? When sharing becomes effortless and uncontrollable, who is accountable for the consequences? This is not a question with a simple answer, and it continues to be debated to this day. Whether you see the Pirate Bay as a hero of internet freedom or a rule breaker, one thing is undeniable. It has changed how the world thinks about data, access, and control in the digital age. If you'd like me to compile everything into a polished version for TikTok or YouTube, just comment 1. By 2015, after years of prosecution, trials, and imprisonment in both Sweden and Denmark, Gottfried Svartholm was finally released. His journey, from an idealistic young programmer to a convicted cybercriminal, had largely come to an end. Years behind bars had distanced him from the tech world he once helped shape. According to his family, upon his release, the only thing he wanted to return to a normal life, with a computer and a sense of peace. Yet while the personal stories of the founders were coming to a close, the Pirate Bay itself continued to exist. Despite numerous domain bans, legal attacks, and shifts in the internet landscape, the site remained accessible through a network of proxies and mirrors around the world. It was no longer at its peak, especially with the rise of legal streaming platforms, but it still held a symbolic place within internet culture. Notably, by this point, the Pirate Bay was no longer directly connected to its original founders. It was maintained by anonymous administrators and a global user community. The system had fully detached from its creators and operated as an independent entity. In that sense, the story of the Pirate Bay is not just about a file-sharing website. It is a powerful demonstration of the strength of decentralized systems. Even when the individuals behind it are arrested, convicted, or disappear, what they created, if designed the right way, can continue to exist and evolve beyond anyone's control. After completing his sentences in Sweden, Gottfried was extradited to Denmark to face one of the most serious cases of his life. He was accused of participating in an attack on the systems of CSC, a technology company that managed data for the Danish government, including information on the police and millions of citizens. This was considered one of the largest data breaches in the country's history. During the trial, prosecutors narkade extensive technical evidence, including stolen data, access logs, and online communications linked to Gottfried's accounts. The defense maintained that he did not directly carry out the attacks and may have been impersonated or had his identity misused online. However, the court rejected this argument. In the end, Gottfried was sentenced to more than 3 years in prison, the harshest penalty for a cyber attack case in Denmark at that time. The verdict marked the end of years of evasion and prolonged legal battles. From a programmer behind one of the world's most famous file-sharing systems, Gottfried had become a deeply controversial figure, standing at the blurred line between internet freedom and high-tech crime. In 2012, after years on the run, Gottfried Svartholm was finally arrested in Cambodia in a joint operation between local police and Swedish authorities. He was quickly extradited back to Sweden to serve his prison sentence related to the Pirate Bay case. However, the story didn't end there. Upon his return, Gottfried faced even more serious charges, this time involving cybercrime. Prosecutors allege that during his time in hiding, Gottfried had been involved in hacking into the systems of a technology company that managed data for the Swedish government, gaining access to the personal information of thousands of citizens. There were also suspicions Kopfat's attacks on banking systems. These accusations dramatically reshaped his image from a copyright resistance icon into a hacker viewed as a national security threat. Gottfried denied all charges, claiming that his computer had been remotely controlled and exploited to carry out the attacks. Nevertheless, the court found him connected to the crimes and handed down additional prison time. He was later extradited to Denmark to face trial in another large-scale hacking case. This silhouette of events highlights the personal cost paid by those behind the Pirate Bay, even as their creation continued to exist beyond their control. If you'd like me to write the final part and conclusion, comment 1. After facing prosecutions and legal crackdowns, the Pirate Bay didn't stop. It continued to evolve to adapt to an increasingly restrictive environment. One of the most significant changes was the shift from using torrent files to magnet links. Unlike torrent files, which can be stored, tracked, or deleted, magnet links are simply hash strings and don't exist as standalone files. This made enforcement and takedown efforts far more difficult. Beyond that, the Pirate Bay optimized its system to become lighter and easier to replicate. The entire database was compressed down to just a few gigabytes, small enough for anyone to download and quickly set up a similar version. This meant that the Pirate Bay was no longer a single entity, but something that could be infinitely duplicated across the globe. They also expanded their network of mirror sites and proxies, ensuring that users could always find a way to access the platform even when specific domains were blocked. Anonymous administrators around the world contributed to maintaining operations, turning the Pirate Bay into a truly decentralized network. Thanks to these changes, the Pirate Bay no longer had any obvious weak points to attack. Shutting down a single website became meaningless, as multiple copies would immediately appear. This marked its full evolution, from a single site into a distributed, flexible ecosystem that is extremely difficult to control. After the verdict was delivered, the founders of the Pirate Bay took different paths in dealing with the legal consequences. Some chose to serve their sentences, while others left Sweden to avoid arrest. Most notably, Gottfried Svartholm, widely regarded as the technical brain behind the Pirate Bay, disappeared from the authorities' radar and was believed to have fled to Southeast Asia. Meanwhile, despite the founders being prosecuted or detained, the Pirate Bay continued operating with little to no interruption. This demonstrated that the system had evolved beyond dependence on any single individual. It no longer needed its creators to survive. Anonymous administrators and the user community kept the platform running. This marked a significant turning point. The Pirate Bay was no longer a defined organization with identifiable leaders, but a decentralized entity with no clear face. That made it more difficult than ever to dismantle. While authorities could pursue individuals, they could not easily shut down a system that had already spread and become self-sustaining on a global scale. In 2009, after years of surveillance and investigation, 4 individuals associated with the Pirate Bay were brought to trial in Sweden in a case that drew global attention. International media closely followed the proceedings, turning it into a symbolic battle between the entertainment industry and supporters of internet freedom. Prosecutors argued that the defendants had facilitated millions of copyright infringements, causing billions of dollars in damages. Meanwhile, the Pirate Bay team maintained that they merely provided a search and indexing tool, not a platform that directly hosted or distributed content. The debate went beyond legal arguments. It reflected a deeper clash over how the internet should be understood. One side viewing it as something to be controlled, the other as a space for freedom. In the end, the court found the defendants guilty. Each was sentenced to 1 year in prison and ordered to pay millions of dollars in damages. This was seen as a major victory for the copyright industry. However, notably, the verdict had little impact on the Pirate Bay's operations. The site continued running as usual, with users accessing it daily. This highlighted a key reality. While individuals can be punished, controlling a decentralized system like the Pirate Bay is an entirely different challenge. If you found this part interesting, comment 1, and I'll continue with the next developments. After the 2006 raid, the Pirate Bay didn't just come back. It evolved into a system that was nearly impossible to shut down. The founders realized that long-term survival meant they couldn't rely on a single server or even a single country. So they began distributing their infrastructure across multiple nations, setting up backup servers and creating numerous mirror sites to replicate the content. What made the Pirate Bay essentially immortal was its network design. The site didn't host data directly. Instead, it acted as an intermediary, connecting users through torrents. This meant that even if servers were taken down, the data still existed across millions of personal computers worldwide. Each user was both a downloader and a distributor, making the system stronger and harder to destroy as it grew. At the same time, they optimized their code to allow rapid deployment anywhere. With just a copy of the data and a new server, the Pirate Bay could be back online in a very short time. They even shared backups, enabling others to create their own versions if necessary. Because of this, the Pirate Bay was no longer just a typical website. It became more like a digital organism, capable of adapting, distributing itself, and continuously regenerating. This forced governments and corporations to recognize a new reality. Targeting a single central point was no longer effective, because in essence, there was no central point left to destroy. On May 31, 2006, Swedish authorities carried out one of the largest raids against the Pirate Bay. More than 50 police officers simultaneously stormed multiple locations, seizing all servers, equipment, and related data. 2 of the founders were arrested, and the media quickly reported that the Pirate Bay had been officially shut down. Entertainment companies celebrated, believing they had dealt a decisive blow to a website responsible for billions of dollars in losses. In the first few hours, it seemed true. The site was inaccessible, the community was shaken, and the authorities declared victory. But what they hadn't anticipated was that the Pirate Bay had never fully depended on the hardware that was confiscated. Prior to the raid, the team had already prepared encrypted backups stored abroad. Just 72 hours later, the Pirate Bay suddenly came back online. They rapidly restored the system from backups, migrated to new servers in another country, and updated their domain. The homepage even mocked the raid with an image of a pirate ship firing cannons at Hollywood. Rather than destroying the Pirate Bay, the raid made it more famous than ever. Traffic surged, and waves of new users poured in. What was meant to be a final blow instead became the biggest publicity boost in the site's history. From that point on, the Pirate Bay entered a new phase, no longer just a single website, but a flexible system capable of rebirth anywhere. This forced governments to confront an unsettling reality. They could seize servers, but they could never fully control the internet. As the Pirate Bay grew rapidly and became one of the largest file-sharing platforms in the world, it began to pose a direct threat to the profits of the entertainment industry, especially Hollywood. Film studios and music companies, led by the MPAA, realized that suing individual users was no longer effective. Instead, they shifted their focus to the system behind it, the Pirate Bay. Pressure quickly escalated from civil lawsuits to the political level. The MPAA began lobbying and applying diplomatic pressure on the Swedish government. This forced authorities, who had previously taken a relatively relaxed approach to the internet, to change their stance. The Pirate Bay was no longer just a file-sharing website. It had become an international issue involving copyright law and control over the internet. From that point on, the conflict was no longer simply between a group of hackers and entertainment companies, but between two opposing ideologies, one advocating for the free flow of information, the other for control and copyright protection. This tension laid the groundwork for more aggressive actions that followed, including the large-scale raid in 2006. If you found this part easy to follow, comment 1 and I'll continue with the next sections. After the Pirate Bay was established, the founding team quickly defined a clear operating philosophy: the free sharing of information and a refusal to yield to legal pressure. To sustain the system, they set up their own hosting company called PRQ, guided by the principle, "We host everything," while deliberately avoiding the storage of user data. This approach helped the Pirate Bay sidestep many external control demands, but it also made them a prime target for numerous lawsuits from major entertainment corporations. Rather than backing down, the founders chose to confront these challenges head-on. They often publicly posted legal warning letters and responded with sarcasm, sometimes even outright provocation. This attitude unintentionally turned each legal attack into a form of free publicity, causing traffic to the Pirate Bay to surge. Users were drawn not only to the content, but also to its rebellious spirit against large corporations. At the same time, the Pirate Bay's technical infrastructure was rapidly advancing. Gottfried developed custom tracker software capable of connecting millions of users simultaneously. The website's interface remained simple, but behind it was a complex and highly efficient system. Every user who joined contributed to making the network stronger and more resilient against disruption. Thanks to the combination of a pro-freedom ideology, bold communication strategies, and a solid technological foundation, the Pirate Bay quickly rose to become one of the most popular websites in the world, attracting tens of millions of daily visitors. The early phase of the Pirate Bay began in the early 2000s in Stockholm, when Gottfried Svartholm, a young programmer passionate about technology, along with two collaborators, built a file-sharing system based on BitTorrent. Initially, it was just a small project serving the anti-copyright community, aiming to create a platform where people could freely share data without censorship and without leaving user traces. By 2004, the project was officially named the Pirate Bay and quickly experienced rapid growth, attracting tens of thousands of users. The system operated as a tracker, connecting users with one another to exchange data rather than storing the content directly. This approach allowed the Pirate Bay to scale quickly and laid the foundation for what would become one of the largest file-sharing platforms in the world.